We really appreciate when you fill that out because it gives us a better idea of where you are and what you may be looking for. So one topic that came up out of the knowledge base between all the companies was really dilutive funding versus non-dilutive funding. What's the difference? What does it even mean? So I'm hoping it's not too basic for some of you, but also just sometimes it's good to kind of lay the groundwork. And so as I was working on those slides, I got carried away, and I hope it's not too long because that's what happens. Unlike what we teach you, I did not run through this. So we'll just have to go and see how quickly I can speak. But of course, money is always important. All of y'all need money. That's always number one. Money and people and money. If you have money, you can buy the people. So, that kind of goes hand in hand. So I'm going to do an overview of dilutive funding versus non-dilutive funding, and also what the costs are. Sometimes we forget that there is cost to all the money. We like to say there's free money, when you say, oh, there's a prize or there's a grant, it's the free money. Well, it's not free. So we'll talk a little bit about what the actual costs are. So, and also just all the different options. So why am I talking about this? For those who have seen me present before, it's my little soapbox, my little, oh, look at what I can do moment. So I still, even during the pandemic, see about 100 or so pitches a year. There are all sorts of different pitches. I frequently do attend the Desert Angel meeting, so I see the for funding, hardcore angel funding pitches. I see a lot of pitches from the University of Arizona through the McGuire Entrepreneurship Program, their other student programs. I see the pitches for the American Made Challenges, where there's actual money involved. And judges for all sorts of different venues. So it's something I really enjoy. I've been doing it for years, and it just really gives me a good insight as to what a good pitch should look like too. So that's another topic I like to talk about, but where does the money come from and what do we do with it is another one. You all have probably seen, unless you're brand new, I think Chesty hasn't seen this one. That's our startup curve. When you have this idea, you get super excited, and then you start committing yourself to maybe going part-time or quitting your job and telling your spouse they better get a job because you'll be out for a while, and then reality sets in and you crash down and like, oh my gosh, this is really hard. You start experimenting and pivoting again. Our Andy and Ping on here, they've been pivoting for a year and a half, but we think that they landed on something. We're super excited. We're rooting for them, of course. And then it's kind of, you land on something, it starts working, you start getting up, and then you come to this infamous product market fit, and then you just need to scale, no problem. And then usually we have this, it's not linear, it's really messy, you go back and forth. But when we look at funding during this time, so I overlaid the startup curve with this, idea to exit, and really what kind of money is in the mix. We really have this prices, and there's a timeline for that. So typically when you start out, you're not going to get VC money, based on your idea. This is much later. You're not going to get angel money based on your idea. That's much later also, but there could be grants and there's self-funding and prices and other things. So I broke it down into dilutive funding and non-dilutive funding. So first we'll focus on dilutive funding. And I know it took me a while to figure out, why is it called dilutive funding? Well, you're getting diluted. You're the founder, and you have maybe money in it or sweat equity or whatever. And then if you take this type of money into the company, you lose some of your ownership. And it's literally shares taking, like on the stock market, when we talk about shares on the stock market, like IBM, other people own a share of your company. And when you do this not on the stock market, which, because you're not there, and we talk about that a little bit too, other people do have financial ownership of your company. And a lot of times there's also control over your company attached to that. So That's where the pie, shapes up. And ideally, you'll be the red pie piece. So you still have a lot of ownership of your company and also a lot of control over your company. But that's what we're talking about. And there's a lot of lots and lots of information about it. And control and finance do not have to be tied to each other. So when we talk about, the angels take 30% of my company, a lot of times we talk about financial sharing in that and not voting sharing. But then other times it is tied together, but it's a nuance that you really need to learn about. So examples, and I'll be talking about all of them. So the FFF will explain what that is: accelerators, crowdfunding, family offices, angel investors, and venture capitalists. And the two that you see that have the little asterisks on it, it's because they can also be non-dilutive. So when I talk about the non-dilutive, we'll talk about what the difference is. So FFF, and actually I didn't spell it out here. So it's the family, friends, and fools, or family, friends, and founders. So take your pick what you like better. And that money can really be, a couple $100 all the way to hundreds of thousands of dollars. We've actually seen a family friend round over $250,000. We don't see it a lot, because that is almost like a seed round through an angel group. And why I put on here is the legal cost, because when you have a big round like that, with several thousands of dollars or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, you probably want to consider involving a lawyer in that and really making sure that your family and friends have some sort of protection, because at this point, they probably just believe in you and your idea. And they're probably not sophisticated investors, and they don't have to be in order to invest in your company, because there's a legal exemption for that. But you also don't want to lose Grandma Dorothy's retirement income for her because you didn't go through the proper legal resources. So if it is a dilutive area where, they get some shares or some future promise of ownership, which happens quite a bit, because at that point, you probably don't want to put a valuation on your company because it's really hard. It's just an idea. But at the same time, if and when you may take follow-on funding, you want to make sure that Uncle Charlie does get some sort of equity that has additional value for him in that, and for yourself too. So at this point, a lot of times founders, if they have any cash or other resources, they put that into the company as well. And you want to put a bit of a legal structure around it. So be aware there's a cost to that. And then the reputation cost is, you lose all their money, and those Thanksgiving dinners will be really awkward because, your dad may not want to talk to you anymore, your brother, because you lost all their money. So that is something to consider. The next category I put here is accelerators. It's fairly new, for people like me that have been in the industry for a couple of decades. Accelerators is like, oh my gosh, it's only 10 years old. Examples for that are the Y Combinator and Techstars, the Mass Challenge. There's a whole bunch of accelerators. And I remember 10 years ago, we still had to explain the difference between an accelerator and an incubator. If you want to have that discussion, I'm always happy to talk about that. But typically, accelerators is a very short-term program and very intense. So they could be anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 months. Some of them are 6 months. You have to go through an application process, you get selected, and then it's a cohort style. You get exposed to a whole bunch of people all the time, have to do a lot of work, and a lot of times just being accepted and you participating in the program, you sign an agreement, and the accelerator gets, right now I think the standard is 5 to 6%, and it's typically for $100,000 to $150,000. And then they typically also reserve the right to do follow-on funding. So once you've gone through the program, you may have the opportunity to get additional money. And typically they also have the pre-written, exactly what you're getting yourself into. but it is considered dilutive funding because, again, you're giving up part of the company. And then there's crowdfunding, also fairly new, especially the equity-based crowdfunding. And I put the SEC rule there. It's SEC stands for Security Exchange Commission. It is US legal. And by the way, I apologize for our international companies if you read this. This is mostly about the US economy and how US funding works. So the ones of you that are international and want to set up US-based companies, this is what you're also looking at. So the SEC rule is 506C, and that allows for companies to publicly raise money for equity. And it's also fairly new. It's only 10 years old, and traditional investors still freak out over it. Examples of that are AngelList and WeFunder. From our perspective, we've had a couple of companies that have gone down the road, but I have not seen a lot of success for that in our community. Again, happy to talk more about all those. This is more of a, giving you the 501 on all those. I think it's 501, maybe it's 401. It's also a lot of effort. So crowdfunding, you think, oh my gosh, there's millions of people and they could all invest in my company. How amazing is that? If only everybody gave me $1, I only need 5 million people and I have $5 million. That's amazing. Well, you have to also reach the $5 million to give you $1. So that's the problem. It's just like you need to market and advertise and brand your product for customers to buy. In this case, you also want to market and brand and advertise for your company for the potential investors to invest in your company. So the way it's worked that I've read about, again, in our group, I haven't seen it work really well yet, but the ones that I've seen is where the founder already had a network themselves of wealthy individuals, and they had extra cash on hand. And so they used the crowdfunding platform as the vehicle to collect this type of money and have it managed through that. And, maybe they picked up another, few investors. So let's say if they needed 50 investors, maybe they already knew 40 of them and they picked up another 10 to do that. So that is sort of the reality on this one. We've done a couple of sessions on that. So if you want more information on that, I'm putting resources in this slide. So when I send it out, you have those resources for it. One area of dilutive funding that is also fairly new to me, I only learned about this like 8 years ago, is the family offices. So for example, the Cascade Investments, it's the family office of Bill and Melinda Gates, not to be confused with their foundation, which we'll talk about later. But a lot of wealthy, hyper wealthy individuals have family offices. Think of, for example, President Bush. They were into oil and they have a lot of money, and those kinds of people have actually professional wealth managers that take the money and then they invest in different things to have a return of investments. A lot of those times, those family offices have care-abouts. So a lot of it is around disease, for example. If they have somebody in the family that has a specific disease, then they may look for innovation and solutions around that. It's a little bit elusive to find them because they don't have an organization. They're literally individually managed, depending on what the family's preferences are. One example, and I did not put that on here, that we have here in Tucson would be Diamond Ventures. So Don Diamond was a developer here in Tucson, first or second generation, I forget, but made a lot of money through real estate. If you're in Tucson, you may have seen the Diamond Children's Center at the university, at the Banner Hospital. So that was funded by the Diamond family, and they have Diamond Ventures, which is their family office in essence, where they fund disruptive technologies. And the rule is they fund what they are interested in. They do their own thesis. They do whatever they want to do, basically. So you do want to learn, what do they care about? And then, maybe understand if they would be a good fit for you. Then, of course, what we most often talk about in regards to dilutive funding is angel investment. That is anywhere, and it's probably even lower. You can probably get as little as $50,000, and typically it maxes out at about $2 million. This is based on SEC Rule 506B. So this is where the angel investor has to follow a certain criteria to be considered an angel investor. It's the $1 million net worth, not considering their primary home or an income level. And this is often also referred to as private placement. So this is not something that you have to do a prospectus, and like if you were to do an IPO or any kind of things, because it's not a public inquiry like the crowdfunding would be that we just talked about, but rather it's private. So in this case, a lot of times it's somebody, maybe somebody who's a wealthy individual and they are interested in putting money into your company. And then, of course, there's the angel groups. There's about 300 angel groups in the nation. And what some people don't understand is that even though it's an angel group like the Desert Angels or the Tech Coast Angels or the Arizona Tech Investors, I can speak, groups, and they each have maybe 50 to 100 members. The group does not invest as a group. It's still individuals that make the investment. So when you, which some of the companies here have, pitch to the Desert Angels, and you get invited for a deep dive, and then there's people interested in investing in you, it's still the individuals that make the decision. So it's not a group decision. It's not the CEO who decides. It's individuals writing a check from their bank account into your business account. So there is still legal costs, because a lot of times, at least what the Desert Angels do, they set up an LLC. So we've talked about cap table in another session. So that's the capitalization table that lists who owns how much of your company. So to make the cap table a little bit easier, a lot of times angels form an LLC, and then the LLC invests in the company. And then they typically have a lead investor who manages this, follow-up meetings, the deep dive, the diligence, the negotiation, and all those kinds of things. The cost in here, of course, is the larger part of equity giving that up. And angels typically aim for 15 to 30%. And what that means is it's this interesting math experience with what is the valuation, how much money are you putting in, and that in essence determines what the share is. The 10 to 35%, that's kind of the anticipated and hoped for rate of return. If you ever talk to an angel, they will tell you they do want 10x, and 10x in this case is not percent, but it's a 10 times their investment. So if they give you 50,000, they would like to get back 500,000, and their range is 2 to 5 years. So ideally, super exciting would be, I'm getting back $500,000 in 3 years based on my $50,000 investment. One thing that surprised me that I hadn't thought through, but of course it makes sense, angel investing is high risk. So it is a lot more risky than buying stocks on the stock exchange, because there's a lot more rules around it. And so what angel investors are looking for is really a higher return than what they could get elsewhere. So even think about housing, right now housing is just going crazy in Tucson. So angel investors are really have those decisions to make from their perspective. I have this money Do I want to put it in real estate because it's really hot right now? Do I want to buy gold? Or do I want to invest it in a startup? So this is kind of the framework of where angel investors come from. Just as a reference for you that, you couldn't just say, oh yeah, you get like 4% if you give me $1 million. That's just not of interest to angel investors because they do want to make money. Then of course we have the venture capitalists. And again, a lot of times, we mix up what an angel investor is versus a venture capitalist. Venture capitalist firms are really firms like Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins. You've heard of those. There's definitely a lot of legal costs because they got lawyers, you got lawyers, everybody got lawyers. You got to figure out all the agreements and the terms and the conditions and all those kinds of things. Venture capitalist firms invest other people's money. So that's a very big distinguishing between angel and venture capital. Venture capitalists, they have funds that they manage. They have fund managers. They have all sorts of managers looking at all sorts of things. They have professional due diligence people. They have professional analysts, just very familiar with the market. They know exactly what they're after. They understand the risk that they're willing to take. And they have responsible to other people's money. So they take money from pension funds, and it could be other wealthy individuals that put money into that. It could be companies, all sorts of different venues for their money. They typically do ask for board membership because they do want to have operational voting power for the company. A lot of times you hear that after a while they kick out the CEO of the company. And when we talk to our young founders here, you're like, well, I don't want to VC money because I don't want to be kicked out of the company. So if you look at it from the VC's perspective, at this point, the company would already have had gone through all this initial, market product fit and all this turmoil. And at this point, the company really would be looking for growth, and the venture capitalists are looking for this growth. They want to participate in the upswing. And if the board felt like the original founder, who may still be in the CEO role, is not a good fit for that, then they may look to have that person replaced. And it's not uncommon that the founder who founds the venture is not a good fit for the growth, because a lot of times, from our perspective, what I see at least is when you're the founder and you're like doing the hard work and you're going around and you're figuring it all out, a lot of times you kind of get bored when you want to do the growth thing. You like the money, of course, because at that point, maybe you can get a salary and, buy that yacht you've been dreaming about, but it's a whole different skill set. So something to consider, way down the road. This is most of the companies that are here at UACI are not far along for this. The only would be like the early VC money. So we do have a group in town that you may have heard about. It's actually, there's a couple. There's Blue Ventures, and there is also UAVC. So they're kind of in between angel. They're more sophisticated than angels. They are using other people's money, but they're not a Kleiner Perkins and they're not a Sequoia. They're more in the $2 to $4 million range that they give, but they do act more like a professional venture capitalist, where they do have analysts on staff and all that. And then there's this corporate venture capital. It's also fairly new. It's only been around for like 8-9 years, and it really came about when those corporations watched the demise of Blockbuster and Sears and realized, oh my gosh, we're not doing a good job innovating within our own organization, and I guess we have to outsource our innovation. So they now are looking at how can we get innovative things into our large corporation, our Intel or Johnson & Johnson, and benefit from it. So it's a little bit still the Wild West out there. You could consider them venture capitalists, but in this case, it really needs to align with what their core competencies are. So there's a little bit more homework on your part to really understand what are they looking for? And they don't always tell you. So you kind of have to just figure out and meet people. And so it could be a very good relationship if whatever you're working on would be a good option for them, because a lot of times they may fund the development and then they may acquire the company. So if that's a pathway that's of interest to you, this is something to look more into it. If it's not a good fit, it could be really a distraction. If you're like, oh yeah, I can do this for them, but that's not really what I want to do with my company, then it could be a distraction for that. Here's some resources. I'm going to just run through this because it's going to be in the PowerPoint that I will send out. But there is definitely resources for all of this. And so you can read without end on those types of things. And if you're the CEO of the company, you should at least know a little bit about all of those things. You don't have to go way into depth and become an analyst, but you should at least understand the landscape. So now we're talking about non-dilutive funding, which is usually the better and more happier place to be for an early startup. And that's something that a lot of our companies go for and do get, because you don't have to give up equity. You're in control of your company. You own it all. You're not giving up equity. You're not giving up any voting controls or anything. And I put the you in apostrophe because it's typically the founding team. If it's just you as the person, or if it's you as the founding team, the company gets the money and benefits from it. And so I'll also go through all those examples. Loans is an option. Our companies have very little loans because they're still asset-based. So even if you hear, we fund startups, you better have a house that you can put up as an asset. So even if it sounds like you don't need anything, loans are typically always asset-based, and you do have to be credit-worthy, and you do have to pay back the principal plus the interest. The couple of things I've seen that worked really well is if you need to buy larger equipment that's like a couple $100,000 or a couple tens of thousands of dollars, you could get a loan on it, but you have to make payments on it. We did have one company way in the beginning. They ended up with a line of credit, which was nice because that's not asset-based, but they also had income. They had revenue. They started depositing checks into their bank account, and then the bank extended a line of credit to them, which was really nice because they could manage the cash flow. Tax credits are fantastic. Oh my gosh, tax credit is almost as free money as you can get because you get a credit of your taxes. Of course, the downfall is you need to have a tax bill. So you have to have a liability on your taxes in order to cut down on the liability through those credits. And again, a lot of the companies that are in our program, they just don't have much of a tax liability because there's no income in the company to be taxed on. So typically what happens is, you have you may get a grant or some money in, but then you expense it all out because you're trying to figure out how to make this company work. So then there's no tax liability at the end. So if you ever do have tax liability, definitely check out the tax credits. There is R&D credits, that's research and development. There's also work opportunity tax credits, meaning if you give employment to a certain kind of folks, then there's a tax credit option, and they can be carried over. So if you're getting into this, okay, we're starting to have income and it's more than our expenses, but it's not enough yet for this full tax credit. A lot of times you can carry them over for the next 5 years or so, which is nice because then, you can really maximize your cash flow again. Back to the family, friends, and fools, founders. Again, money varies greatly. One option is that the spouse works. That's really, we've seen it a couple of times now where the founder, has a family member and they are working, they have a day job, they make the income, they pay the bills. So the other person can really work on the company. And then you want to make sure it's a donation or an investment. Is grandma giving you the $5,000 because she really likes you, and that's going to be your Christmas presents for the next 10 years? And I bring that up because we do have students sometimes, or recently graduated students. Or is grandma expecting, the money to come back? So you really want to clarify that with your family and friends as well, especially friends also, what is the expectation? There is non-equity based crowdfunding. So like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and GoFundMe are in that category. Again, it's a lot of effort. So I saw some studies a few years old, but it was, again, 80 to 90% of people that you got money from is people that you brought onto the platform. And in this case, a lot of times what it works pretty well for is like a pre-sale. I'm not sure if you remember the Pepper Watch, which ended up being a big mess because they couldn't deliver. But if you have a device or something, a consumer product, and you want to see if anybody would be interested in buying that, that could be a great platform to check it out. Is this something that people want to buy? I know one of our companies, Amber Grading, did I forget which platform they use, but they did one, and it's this, where you get the T-shirt or you get a signed sticker or some prize or something in exchange for your donation, but it's more handled like a donation or a pre-sale. So it's not equity, so you don't have to follow all those SEC rules on that one. Prices, a lot of our companies go for the prices. Prices are nice. Again, almost like free money. The most thing on that one is really the effort. It takes effort to go fill out the application. First of all, it takes effort to find those darn prices because they're very infrequent, very just like all over the place. They just pop up and you either get to hear about them or you don't. The ones that we advertise always for is Idea Funding and Venture Madness. But it's local here in Tucson. If you're in Maryland, you probably will never hear about Idea Funding, and maybe Maryland has an Idea Funding and we don't know about it. So there's the effort part. You have to kind of constantly monitor, what's going on. Is it appropriate for me? How much is it to apply for it? And then even if you apply, then you may have to pitch, and you have to practice. There's some time commitment, like the Venture Madness. If you end up not showing up, you have to pay $1,000 because they really counted on you to be there. So that is really the price you pay for the prizes. And then there's also industry-specific prices. So that was the general prices, and then there's industry-specific prices. For example, the American-made challenges. If you're into energy and you're part of our program, you probably know all about that. So you have to be in energy, you have to have innovation solutions. So it's very specific what the requirements are. So not everybody can apply for that. BP also had a prize competition out, and one of our previous companies won first round, second round, going on to actually implementing their technology in a mine. So super exciting. But again, it's like 10 in the world got the first prize, and then 2 out of them. So it's very tedious. It has to ideally match with your technology, so it's a good fit. Purina is another one that I brought on here. Scott isn't even here, but Purina, the dog and cat food, pet food company, had a prize competition out. So, if you're doing that, you apply. Tech Connect, I just popped one into the LinkedIn. They're doing some data innovation challenge. You have to read through, does it match with what I do, or would it be a distraction? Because there is a whole process to do that. But typically prices, again, you don't have to pay back, no interest. It is considered income in your company. So then you can take those tax credit against it if you don't have too many expenses against it. And then moving over into the grants, again, our companies get a lot of grants. There is really, I put it in 3 different buckets. There's organizations, foundations, and then the federal ones. organizations are like the city of Tucson. Hello Alice has one. It's this random $5,000 grant that they give out. You have to apply. I have no idea how many do that, but it's like there, you know, look, if you qualify, if you meet the criteria, and you can apply. And then also, oh, this is where I put Tech Connect because it's more of an organization. And then randomly, one of our companies won the Emerge AC Fast Grant. That was a grant from the governor's office of Arizona. Again, you know, infrequent, we didn't even know about it. Otherwise, we would have advertised for it amongst the group, but they knew, they applied and they got money. So takes effort to keep track of them. Foundations, that's a little bit more organized. This one is back to the match versus the distraction. So Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation also has is available. So they have a venture arm, they have foundation. You know, if you have lots of money, you can do all sorts of things. The Flynn Foundation is one here in Arizona, and I know several of the ones actually on the call have received that money. It's the $30,000 once a year. 6 to 7 companies get it. It's an application process, a review process. Michael J. Fox Foundation is one that I know one of our previous companies received. And there's this one where also there's a lot of care abouts. It needs to match, like Michael J. Fox. It's about Parkinson's disease, you know, so if you're doing anything around that, maybe that's a good venue for you. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a lot about bringing medical advances to underdeveloped countries. You know, if you're into that, maybe that's a good venue for you. Flynn Foundation is all about biotech in Arizona. So if you care about that, you know, that could be a good effort. And then, of course, we have the bigger grants from the government, and we talk about SBI City all the time. And there's also, you know, it's this match versus distraction, because you do get the money, you know, it's free money, you don't have to pay it back. It's a lot of effort. It's very competitive. There's a lot to it. You have to jump through all sorts of hoops. You know, you have to register, you have to write, you have to submit, you have to just align and follow all the rules. It's so involved that we have Sonia as our grants manager here to help you with the process. And it really works out. It can work out if it's a good match, and if you have really something that the granting entities are caring about, and if you have really the innovation and the background to bring this to the top. So dilutive versus non-dilutive. Some people think, you know, dilutive is like this whole puppet, you know, now I'm not in control anymore. I like to see it more as, you know, there's a whole funding strategy, and it's all the puzzle pieces that you're trying to fit together. So I do have a couple of examples of real life, not to be named companies, and I may have switched a little bit around, but so in essence, one of them was a university tech transfer company. They had the idea within the university. There was TLA with the asset development money that they got. They got a couple of, at least 1 or 2 STTRs. Then they transferred it into a company, and the founder, the CEO, who was not on the original invention team, but he is the CEO and co-founder now, basically sent his wife back to work saying, you know, I quit my job, I'm doing this. And the wife said, sure, sounds great. Back to work she went, and to pay for the mortgage and the food. And the founder could really focus on the company. They subsequently received, got a Flynn Foundation, which is a grant. SBI is a grant. They went to the Desert Angels. They're back for the 3rd time right now. So that's the equity funding. They also considered a corporate partnership, and I forget if they actually did that or not. I think it was, though. It was a co-development of a product. So it was almost like a contract, like contracted work to get in a few thousand, I think it was a couple of $100,000, and it aligned with what they were trying to do anyways. And then also received now an SBIR and also the Arizona Commerce Authority Innovation Challenge. The other example is a community company, so not a tech transfer from the university. Started out with self-funding, putting it on the credit card, digging into savings. Won first prize at Idea Funding, which came, I believe at that time it was maybe $10,000. I forget. It changes every year. So maybe it was about $10,000. Did the first iCore, where it was $3,000 for customer discovery, applied for phase 1, as